Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. We appreciate you participating in today's virtual discussion. I am Tara King, Senior Project Director at the American Association for the Advancement of Science, or AAAS for short. AAAS is the world's largest general science association and the publisher of the Science family of journals. I serve as the coordinator of the STEM Resource and Evaluation Center, which is abbreviated as the STEM REC. The STEM REC is happy to organize this virtual event facilitated by our REC partner colleagues at MN Associates, Inc. And today, this event features the work of Dr. Sharon Zumbrun and her colleagues on measuring sense of belonging in academic contexts. Next slide. We'd like to take a moment to see who's in the audience today and to see what brings you here. What are you curious about? So in the chat, we invite you to introduce yourself by telling your name, institution, and project track if you have an STEM award. And tell us what one or two questions do you have about sense of belonging. At this time, we'll also launch a one-question poll so we can see what role you are in your STEM award. I'll pause for a moment to give you some time to answer these questions. Okay, we have a good number of people who answered the poll, so I will end that. So majority of people in the audience are PIs, and then we have some co-PIs, evaluators, and another role. So if you would like to express what you mean by other, you're welcome to put that in the chat. And yes, please continue to introduce yourself in the chat and put in a question or two that you have about sense of belonging. And that will really help us to guide our discussion and make sure we focus on topics and questions that are of interest to our audience members. So we'll move forward, but continue to answer the questions and introduce yourself in the chat. I'm going to go over some housekeeping items, and then I'll share a bit about the STEM REC before I turn things over to my colleagues, Kavita Mitapalli and Nina De Las Alas at MN Associates, Inc. So some housekeeping. Please keep your microphone on mute when you're not speaking. We encourage you to write questions or comments in the chat throughout the webinar. And when we get to the Q&A portion, if you wish to speak to ask a question, you can use the raise your hand button and we'll call on you. If you're comfortable doing so, we welcome you to turn on your camera. To help us to get to know one another and what the audience interests are on this topic, please continue to introduce yourself in the chat and write what questions you have about sense of belonging if you haven't yet done so. We're happy to have 2 American Sign Language interpreters joining us today. In addition, we're pleased to have a live transcriptioner providing closed captioning, which you can turn on using the button at the bottom of your screen. Thank you so much to these individuals for helping us make the information presented in this webinar more widely accessible. The slides being presented today can be found on the STEM REC website. If you'd like to follow along, you can download them, and I'll put that link in the chat here for you. I've also included a link to the event webpage, where a recording of today's webinar will be posted when it becomes available. We hope that today's event runs smoothly for you, but if you have any technical difficulties or questions, Reach out to my colleague Jamila Blake in the chat or send her an email at jblake@AAS.org. Finally, we would really appreciate your feedback on today's session. Toward the end of the webinar, before we wrap up, there will be a quick 4-question participant survey for you to complete before signing off. We thank you in advance for your help with this. Next slide. Before I jump into telling you more about the AAAS STEMRec, it's important for me to share a few disclaimers with you. This material is based upon work supported by the National Science Foundation under grant number 2224093. Any opinions, findings, interpretations, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this material are those of its authors and do not represent the views of the AAAS Board of Directors, the Council of AAAS, AAAS's membership, or the National Science Foundation. Additionally, the AAAS STEMRec is promoting consultation with MN Associates as they're part of the REC, but this does not constitute an endorsement of MN Associates, Inc. as evaluators by the National Science Foundation. Okay, next slide. Now let me give you a quick snapshot of the AAAS STEMRec. In October 2022, through a competitive proposal process, AAAS received NSF funding to manage the STEM Resource and Evaluation Center, or REC for short. The STEMRec aims to create a greater infrastructure, build community, coordinate work, and synthesize findings across the entire NSF STEM portfolio of projects. The REC's work focuses on promoting the exchange of ideas, resources, opportunities, and knowledge about effective strategies and practices to increase the number of talented, low-income students who obtain degrees and careers in STEM. The activities of the REC work across multiple levels. For instance, we support the effectiveness of the STEM portfolio through publishing STEM outcomes and impacts reports. We build the capacity of current and prospective STEM awardees through webinars like this one. And we support STEM scholars, STEM persistence, and professional development through convening an annual in-person scholars meeting, which this year will take place in San Diego, California in October. We welcome you to visit our website to learn more about the REC and join our mailing list to stay updated and informed. I'll just drop in the chat links to our website and our listserv. Next slide. So while the REC is managed by AAAS in coordination with NSF, we cannot reach our goals without the significant contributions of our full team. This slide shows all of the organizations we partner with to carry out the work of the REC. I want to highlight MN Associates, who provides research and evaluation technical assistance support to current and prospective awardees, and who is facilitating our webinar today. And with that, I'm happy to turn things over to Kavita Mitapalli, CEO of MN Associates. Kavita?
Thank you so much, Tara. Hello, everyone. Welcome. And thank you again for joining us for today's webinar. I am Kavita Mitapalli from MN Associates, Inc. Here with my colleague, Nina Dallas Alice. We are a research and evaluation firm based in Washington, D.C., and a REC partner to provide evaluation TA to all the grantees. So in terms of the objectives of the webinar, our focus is really on engaging STEM grant stakeholders in discussions about evidence-based practices, or EBPs, within the STEM programs. Our primary objective is to create a space for knowledge exchange on these EBPs, allowing stakeholders like yourselves to share insights and also best practices that have been effective in your program. Additionally, we have 2 secondary objectives: to assess the usefulness and effectiveness of this webinar series, and also to identify specific areas where the REC via M&A can provide useful and meaningful evaluation TA and support the STEM grantees. So our goal really is to ensure that all participants leave with a deeper understanding of the EBPs and the resources available to support your implementation. Next slide, please. So today's webinar is sweet and simple. So we will go through some of the EBP resources and we will introduce our esteemed speaker. Then there'll be a featured presentation by our speaker, Dr. Sharon Zumbrum. We'll leave some space and time for the questions and answers that will be coming through. There is a very short participant survey. Please do not leave the room without completing that survey. We will chase you down. And then we will also talk about some of the upcoming events, and we will wrap up. Next slide, please. So this is a slide that we really want you to pay attention to. So if you're doing something else, leave that and pay attention. To support your work with the evidence-based practices, or EBPs, the REC website, hosted through AAAS, offers a wide variety of resources that you can access anytime. So one of the key resources is the EBP repository since July of 2024. So right now we have 16 EBPs, and one of them is sense of belonging, and there are 15 others. So please take a moment to check that out. Additionally, we also have a guidebook for preparing research and evaluation plans, which was published in January. Right now, it's also hosted on the page on the website. So please take a moment to take a look at that. It is mostly designed to assist you in developing some strong evaluation plans, not only for STEM, for other grants as well. It has 4 chapters, and I would strongly recommend, because it was written by M&A, to check it out. So here we go. On to Nina.
Thank you, Kavita. It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Sharon Zumbrun. Dr. Zumbrun is an education psychologist and professor in the School of Education at Virginia Commonwealth University. She is the co-director of the Motivation in Context Research Lab and the developer of Robocogger, an online software system developed to assist K-12 students in improving their writing abilities. Thank you again, Dr. Zumbrun.
Thanks so much. I'm really excited to be here with you all to talk to you about all things student sense of belonging and some of our experiences as a research team measuring student belonging. By the end of today's conversation, I'm hoping that you walk away with just what you're looking for, some evidence-based practices and some ideas for how you might measure student belonging in your research context. I probably should have talked about this, but next slide. Thank you. So I'll start with just like a quick brief note about what is student sense of belonging. In short, it is students' perceptions of the ways in which they feel accepted, they feel like they fit, they feel like they're supported. There's an interesting piece that there's a whole special issue of student belonging that's starting to come out in EdPsych Review, and one of the journals, not one of the journals, one of the articles of the special issue in student belonging noted that there was wide variety in how researchers were conceptualizing and operationalizing, and often there was actually quite a bit of difference between how they were operationalizing or defining student belonging and then how they were measuring it. I'm going to reference a few pieces like that throughout today's conversation, and I'm happy to provide links to those pieces at the end for anyone who's interested, or I'll also drop my email. You can email me for anything that you're interested in learning more about. So I'm defining sense of belonging in this way for this talk. Next slide. And why do we measure sense of belonging? So here's just a few of the many different success outcomes, adaptive outcomes that have been related to student sense of belonging. By and large, we know that when students feel like they belong, they are more successful, they are happier, they have stronger, healthier well-being, and all these things support a warmer campus climate or classroom climate. The things that I'll talk about today, I think somebody mentioned this in the chat, but there's different grain sizes to look at student belongings. Sometimes we look at student belonging from sometimes we look at student belonging from at the university level. So do I feel like I fit in at this institution? Is this a place for me? Do other people here, are other people here like me? And then sometimes we measure at the department or program level. So in my program, say biology, are there other students here like me, or am I not quite similar to, are there key differences that I notice about who I am and how I feel like I am as a student, and what I perceive others to be around me? And that goes both for their peers as well as their instructors. And so looking at across our work, we've looked at belonging from a lot of different angles. So at those grain sizes, thinking about how do students feel like they belong in the program? How do they feel like they belong in the classroom, and how do they feel like they belong at the institution? And I think that each of those levels, and there are more, each of those levels provide interesting insights to how we might be able to improve student belonging across the institution. So I'll talk a little bit about each of those types across today. Presentation. Next slide, please. So the primary measure that I'm going to talk about today is a psychological sense of school membership scale. Forgive my typo here in the title here. So this measure was developed originally for middle school students by Carol Goodnow in '93, and it is one of the most widely used measures of student belonging in the literature today. That same piece that I was talking about, that same review that noted the discrepancy between how researchers were operationalizing belonging and then how they were quantitatively measuring belonging, that same review found that across the articles, I think it was 2000 to 2021, there were the studies that were included in the review included 52 different measures of school belonging, which is quite a lot. And so how do you know which one to use? I think when it's hard to tell really which one to use, but this is a popular one. And it's not a perfect one, I should note that, but it does give some understanding of how students feel they belong. And I think there's something to be said about its popularity. Speaking to that review I just noted, when more researchers can use the same instrument, of course, then that's helpful for understanding the ways in which findings might transfer across different places. Let's talk a little bit about the scale. Next slide, please. So this scale, I'm going to be talking today about how we adapted it, and we're not alone. We adapted it, but we were not the first to adapt it to the university higher ed context. but we've had further adaptations that I'll talk about. So this is more, this is a scale that really zeroes in on the school or the institution itself. So at that higher level of belonging, not higher level of belonging, but that institutional level of belonging. It's a fairly simple scale, and it doesn't typically take too long for respondents to complete. Next slide, please. The key dimensions of the scale include the ways in which that students feel like they are supported by their teachers or their instructors, and how often they feel like or the degree to which they feel like they are valued and treated fairly. So it also, this scale also examines attachment or fit. So the ways that they feel like a true part of the community. Importantly, the scale zeroes in also on peer relationships. So just similar to how the scale examines students' perceptions of their relationship with their teacher or their instructor, the scale also examines their connections that students have with their classmates, the degree to which they feel like they are accepted by those classmates. And that could be, again, it doesn't specify whether it's at where those classmates come from or those peers come from, which I do think is a limitation of the scale. And then finally, an overarching sense of acceptance, the degree to which they feel like they're welcomed at the school, and they feel included. Next slide, please. So just to give you a sense of what some of the items of the scale include, I wanted to just provide a few here, and it's these. There are several dimensions here, and one question you might be asking is, so you see different dimensions. Do the dimensions actually translate into different factors? There have been some researchers have found that the different dimensions do translate into different factors. For our work, we found that it didn't. We found that it was really just one overarching factor, one construct that so we counted just the one factor. I'll give just another second for y'all to look over these items. Next slide, please. Thanks so much. Forgive my coworker just came in, a little distracting for me. Apologize for that. So many people who have used the PSSM scale have looked at sense of belonging for, of course, academic research, but there have been several who have also used this scale to evaluate the effectiveness of programs or interventions, to take a general sense of the school climate, perceptions of how students feel like they're included or not, and to assess specific areas of student support. Next slide, please. So next, I'm going to talk about how we adapted this scale and to use in our research study. So the specific study that I'm going to be talking about was a mixed method study, and we really zeroed in on wanted to understand just the degree to which students did feel like they belonged but at the classroom level. So that meant that we needed to adapt the PSSM from the university level to the classroom level. So just a couple notes about this specific study. It was explanatory sequential mixed method study, meaning that we started with quantitative data and then followed up with students in a second qualitative phase in one-on-one interviews. And in the quantitative phase, where we use the PSSM, we were examining how the belonging was one aspect that mediated between how students feel about their instructor support and their engagement and motivation, and then ultimately their success. All right, next slide, please. So, like I mentioned, we adapted this scale from the school level to the classroom level. I noted before that we weren't the first ones to adapt the scale to the to higher ed, and we followed we looked at a few studies that had already done that and followed changed some of the wording in pretty similar ways to prior research, but the biggest differences were really about thinking about how to adapt the items to really understand students' sense of belonging in a specific class. We looked at psychometrics for our adapted scale, and found that it had high reliability, and that included 2 new items that we included to assess student belonging. Those included both of those were related to peer relationships. Like I mentioned before, that others have found that the PSSM does include several factors, but with our work, we found that all of the items loaded onto that single factor. All right, next slide, please. I'll zip right to our findings here. So essentially, we were looking at the Connell-Wilborn model that looked at motivation and belonging as mediators between supportive learning environments and engagement and success. And what you can see here is that we found that belonging related to self-efficacy and student self-efficacy, or their beliefs about their ability to be successful in that class, and belonging also related to students' task value. So how relevant did students find the content of the class? And only self-efficacy then predicted engagement, self-efficacy predicted engagement and then achievement. The thing that we were perhaps most interested in for this study was the link between the supportive classroom environment and belonging. So that little arrow there. So what is it that makes students feel like they belong? What is it that happens in the classroom that leads students to feel perceptions of whether they fit in or they don't fit in? So that led us to really wanting to understand. And so we followed up with a random group of the groups were not random. So what we did was we separated all of those who volunteered for the qualitative phase of the study. We separated them into groups: high, average, and low. We calculated those by taking, so essentially the high students who were in the high belonging group were had a mean belonging score I'm sorry, they had a mean belonging score that was a standard deviation above of the mean. Sorry, their total score was a standard deviation above the mean, and the low belonging group students, their score was a standard deviation below the mean. So we followed up with random students who were in those two groups, and we had three groups. I'm sorry, 3 students per group. Next phase, please. And what we found from this, what we found from the qualitative phase helped us really understand and unpack some of the findings from the quantitative phase. We were really able to dig into more of the nuances that go on in the classroom, that the survey that we used to look at their perceptions of the support they were receiving in the classroom from their instructor, it really helped us understand the ways in which the nuanced ways that students were feeling supported. And what we found was interesting, because we originally, when we were designing the study, focused on the instructor. Of course, we would think the instructor is important. So we really, the scale that we used focused on the instructor support, the students' perceptions of instructor support. But what the qualitative findings really showed was that the true importance of peers and how accepted that students felt, how accepted students felt among their peers, and not only accepted, but how similar they were to their peers. One main difference that we found with the students from the low belonging group was that they felt quite different from their peers, and sometimes disrespected. And although everyone mentioned that they felt supported by their instructor, it really, that didn't really come out until we asked students specifically. When we asked students kind of open-ended generally, why do you feel like you belong or you don't belong or you fit in this class? It was always about the peers first. That was important. Next slide, please. So some of the our findings with this study really helped us think about how much we're really missing when it comes to understanding student belonging and supporting student belonging is the perceptions of the students. And really, someone asked in the chat about different groups of students. And I think when we think about different groups, it's so much more nuanced than any scale could really ever show. And that's what the qualitative data really provide is a way to be more, not only more nuanced, but really examine some of the intersectional identities that students bring to the classroom and the university. So that's something that we've really tried to focus on in some of our more recent work. Next slide. So this is a piece that we have actually under review for that same special issue that I noted before on belonging. And what we've done is we tried to incorporate different ways of unpacking student belonging. And not necessarily student belonging, but rather the experiences that lead students to feel whether or not they belong or don't belong. And for this study, we focused primarily at the institutional level. So what you're looking at here is somewhat blurry, sorry about that, table of some of our qualitative participants for this study. And I added this to the slide because I think it really does help to see at a glance, you know, some of the reasons why students may or may not feel like they belong on campus. And so looking across for this study, we collected quite a lot more data than we collected in the 2014 data. We collected student demographic data. We collected demographic data in several ways, including in addition to collecting the institutional data, we also asked students to, in the quantitative phase, we asked students to list their identities. We asked them to think about, can pretend that they were going to fill out or they were going to create a social media page for on campus, and what are the things that you would put on your, what are the identities that you would put on your social media page? And asking that question and then looking at that data across our many students really provided so much insight into the granular level of students' identities that I don't think researchers are always considering. And so thinking about the ways in which students identify and how those different identities can be supported, or how we as institutions and instructors may not be supporting those different identities. What I've learned across the many years that I've been doing mixed methods research is I don't think we ask students enough, because it's kind of hard to ask and to understand the qualitative data sometimes that comes with asking. But in addition to the identity question that we included in the quantitative survey and the institutional demographic and success data, we also collected student swipe data. So how often were they going to financial aid billing? How often were they going to the writing center? How often were they getting academic support? And that was really quite interesting to see differences across the students. Because with this study, similar to the last study, we looked at whether or not students were had higher belonging scores or lower belonging scores, and we note those in the table as well. Some of the other interesting data that we collected, I don't think we expected it to be quite as powerful as it was, and that is the student maps and the student drawings. In this slide, you can see that the belonging in academic spaces, the maps, we list whether or not the students noted whether an overall valence, a positive valence of they felt safe, emotionally safe, physically safe in their on campus, or if it was overly or in general negative. Next slide. So here's two examples of what that data looked like. So on the left, on the right, I mean, let me start there, is a campus map. So it's de-identified here, but it wasn't, of course, when we gave it to the students to complete. And essentially, when students came in to participate in the interview, we used both the drawing activity and the map activity. We incorporated that kind of in the middle of the interview, and essentially asked students to place stickers across the different areas where they felt where they belonged, where they felt that they could be themselves, where they felt accepted by their peers, where they felt physically safe, and the opposite to all of those questions. And what we found was that students really differed across the different places that they felt emotionally safe, physically safe, and then accepted by their peers. And our team, after sharing this with our administrators, it's led to some really interesting conversations about when you overlay the maps together, like where are those places really showing where the university could put more support for students across campus. And we also asked the students to give a quick sketch. This made students very nervous because many did not feel like they were artists. But we asked students to give a quick sketch of a time that they felt like they belonged on campus. And as you can see, the artistic quality of the drawings may not be the highest, but that was exactly what we were going for. We actually asked them to not bother with it, to just give us a quick sketch. We actually only gave them 3 minutes, and so that really stressed them out. But we wanted to emphasize that it was really about the ideas and not their artistic ability. And so in this drawing, what you're looking at is one of the students who felt like this student really felt like she belonged on campus. She and drew herself here in band practice. She was highly engaged in across several music clubs, and in this, when she was describing this drawing to us, she noted that the experience was relaxing, it was fun, and she noted in her interview that she had been a band student since she was 11, so this was a true piece of her identity. It was interesting with this specific one and how it connected to her map. So this is the same student's map on the right, and it's doesn't make sense to you all looking at it necessarily, but what we found was that this specific student on her map, she connected the map, the campus performing arts center, as one of the places where she felt most accepted, because that's where her people always are. And so the thing that we found most helpful and interesting about the drawing activity is it gave students another avenue to express why they felt like they belonged. And I think the pause and having to come up with a salient experience really was interesting, because it helped them give more detail about what it was that makes them feel like they fit in on campus, leading of course to lots of ideas for administrators to implement when we're trying to think about how can we improve student belonging on campus? What can we change about the learning context to foster higher belonging and essentially make the university a place where students want to belong? Next slide, please. So similar to what we've done in this last study is really look to use the data like, okay, where are students feeling like they belong, but where are they not feeling that? How can we improve those specific spaces? And in the first study, the 2014 study, we zeroed in on students with both low and high belonging, specifically thinking about what is it that makes students feel like they belong. Let's capitalize on those types of activities or opportunities. And then where is it, what is it specifically that is happening that makes students feel like the place isn't for them? And so from this data, we've been able to share it with administrators. It's led to some meaningful conversations about making change, and as well as building interventions. Next slide, please. Lots of time for questions. Thank you all.
Thank you so much. We welcome all of you to share any questions, any comments, or any other insights that you may have from your own research, so that we can have a conversation. So please feel free to do so. And if you'd like to come on camera, you're welcome to do that too. So we have a question from Julius. Hey, Julius. The STEM programs report using faculty mentoring to address a student's low sense of belonging. Would you recommend this approach, and do you have recommendations for specific approaches the faculty mentors should utilize for the greatest impact?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think this is I think faculty mentoring can be such a powerful impetus for fostering student belonging. I suspect that several of us on this call had that experience, and that's what potentially led us to pursuing the advanced degrees that we have, was can be traced back to a mentor. So no doubt, I think mentoring can play a critical role. I think it probably depends on the reasons why the student doesn't feel like they belong. So you mentioned low sense of belonging, and I think having an adult, adult at the mentor is important, but I don't know if it'll be enough, right? Like we noted in our, like we found, and somewhat we're surprised about, was really the instructor or the mentor is important, but it's so critical to have a sense of kinship with your peers as well. So I absolutely would recommend mentors. I just think that they're having a multi-pronged approach to addressing student belonging is probably necessary.
Nina, you have a question?
Yeah, sure. So one aspect of the STEM grants is that they have cohorts of students. So do you know if sort of a cohort formulation, how does that work with terms of kind of fostering that peer-to-peer support that you were able to capture in your qualitative research?
Yeah, there has been some work related to cohorts, because I think they build, with cohorts, you build a sense of community right from the beginning, and I that's such a it's like a built-in group that students can feel like they can rely upon, rather than having to forge every single relationship on their own. And so I think it provides a possible opportunity for students to belong. That said, it kind of depends on the makeup of the cohort, I would suspect. If the cohort is made up of students, if I'm a student in that cohort and the majority of the students don't look like me, then perhaps it wouldn't actually engender a tremendous feeling of belonging on my part. But I suspect that those cohorts are designed to be quite thoughtful about those identities and in the groups that you're talking about.
Thank you, Sharon. Earlier, Shannon, we have Shannon here with us. Hi, Shannon. She had a question about, I'm curious about what assessment measures others have used or adapted to measure sense of belonging. I'm also curious what types of sense of belonging they consider. in their college as a whole, in their major, in their field, or in STEM?
Mhm. So we talked a little bit about how the PSSM can be adapted to look at both classroom, and the original format is to look at the school wide level. And I think what we have found with our work is, and forgive me if I'm misunderstanding the question, but what we found from that second study that I noted was just how important the program was to supporting students' general sense of belonging on campus, was whether or not they felt like the program was for them or they felt like they belonged at the program level. And so I think finding those different, assessing belonging at those, not only belonging, but they're understanding students' experiences at each of those levels is really important, because otherwise you're going to really miss some critical aspects of things that make up whether or not a student feels like they belong. And no doubt there's nuance across those different programs and of course across students within those programs. But the one thing that we did find was just how important it was for students, their own buildings, essentially. So from what we found from the mapping data was several students noted that they didn't feel comfortable going, if there were biology majors, for example, they didn't feel super comfortable going into the classes where they, the buildings where they had classes in the biology building, for example. So like this wasn't for them, but this was for them. So they just, and it wasn't, sometimes it was because of the people that they see there, and other times the students really couldn't put their finger on it. It was just a vibe that they got, and that's a hard thing to capture, right? With our measures, but all in all, that students felt like when they knew people, it definitely mattered beyond that vibe.
Thank you so much. If we don't have any other questions, maybe we can go back to the slide deck, Jamila, Tara, and we can quickly wrap this up. So we want to draw your attention to the TA assistance request form. And this form is useful, especially if you have any questions related to generation of knowledge, research, or evaluation. So as M&A is the REC TA provider, would be more than happy to help you through any of your evaluation queries or concerns. So please feel free to use that form and it will come to us, and directly we can either email you back or we can set up a Zoom time to assist you. Next slide, please. That's Tara.
Okay, so thank you all for participating. We'd love to get your feedback on our session today and hear your suggestions for topics for future virtual events. Please complete our short participant survey, which has popped up on your screen, and tell us if you gained something useful, if you gained a better understanding of the evidence-based practice sense of belonging. Tell us what your main takeaway was. We'd love to hear that. And what other topics you would like to learn more about in future discussions and knowledge exchanges. We definitely consider your feedback when planning future events. I also want to highlight another STEM Rec resource, which I want to share with you is in December 2023, the STEM Rec developed a deep dive report titled STEM Students and Their Sense of Belonging, STEM Programs, Practices, and Empirically Based Recommendations. And the data we obtained for the empirical part of this report was obtained through survey collection of current PIs with STEM programs. So really appreciate those that did participate in this survey, and I wanted to share it in case you find it useful and want to use some of the takeaways from the report to inform your work around sense of belonging as well. One other note, some people have messaged that some of our websites are not opening or the links aren't working to our STEMRec websites. We've encountered this before, and it tends to be something with your IT department that's having trouble with access. So if you're unable to access the STEMRec websites, we just advise you to inquire with your IT department to see if they can troubleshoot that for you. Okay, as you continue to take the short poll, I'll tell you about some upcoming events that we have. So we have a few virtual discussions coming up that you might be interested in that we'd like to invite you to. There are 2 more events in our evidence-based practice virtual discussion series. One on April 23rd at 3 p.m., which is focused on assessing disciplinary STEM identity through surveys. And that features Dr. Hazari from Florida International University as our guest speaker. And then we have another event on May 1st at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, focused on the College Student Mentoring Scale Survey with Dr. Crisp from Oregon State University as our featured speaker. Also on the topic of mentoring, we're hosting another event on April 28th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. And this is part of our Capacity Building at MSI's series. And in this webinar, we're exploring effective mentoring practices, and it'll feature a panel discussion with 2 sets of mentor-student pairs. And also for scholars, so please spread the word to your STEM scholars. We're hosting an STEM Scholars virtual community workshop on April 22nd at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. And this event will provide scholars with an introduction to professional societies and feature a panel discussion with representatives from a variety of professional associations. What I'll do is post the links to all of these registrations in the chat with you. They're also on the slide deck, which you can download, but given that some people are having difficulty downloading it, these are direct links to the registration forms.
Thank you, Tara. And since we have just a couple of minutes, I would urge all of you to please complete the survey. We have 7 out of 12 who have taken the survey. Thank you so much.
And on our final slide, we just want to wrap up by saying thank you all for participating today. Big thank you to our invited speaker, Dr. Zumbrun, for sharing her research with us. And thanks to everyone in the audience for their great questions. Please continue to provide your feedback in our survey before you close out today. And we just want to share with you, we'd love for you to stay connected with the STEMRec and our website, explore our resources, sign up to receive our monthly newsletter, and interact with us on social media. I'll put all of these links in the chat so they're easily accessible. And Kavita, any last words or thoughts from M&A?
Well, we are actually looking forward to hosting 2 other researchers, faculty members very soon. So we would be very happy if you are able to join us and also spread the word. And also, please let us know what other kind of webinars we could be hosting that would be useful to you all. Some of you have actually joined us for the preparation of proposal webinars that concluded in March, actually in January and February, and we got some really good feedback. Thank you for the same. So we are also welcoming any ideas, any other thoughts that you may have for us as TA providers, because we are really here to help you. So thank you so much again for being a part of the STEM community.
Thank you, Kavita, Nina, M&A team, and Dr. Zambram. Really appreciate you engaging with our audience today, and thank you, audience. We look forward to engaging with you in future webinars and activities. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.